Well, our goal is to try to help people before they hit bottom, before they need or have to go to rehab, because eventually you got to learn to be clean and sober in the real world. And the way that we help people do that is to address the whole family system. So we split them up so everybody gets a lawyer and advocate. And a lot of it gets solved behind the scenes. We can make progress so much faster that way.
Welcome to another episode of the Harder to Breathe podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Dusick. I was the founding drummer of Maroon 5, but I'm now a licensed therapist, author, and mental health advocate. On today's show, we have licensed counselor Amber Hollingsworth. She specializes in addiction recovery for families. She has a recovery center and a YouTube online community called Put the Shovel Down, which is a very large community advocating for addiction recovery in families. It's a really interesting and fascinating platform. We get into it with Amber in just a minute, but for right now, my co-host as always is Brian Duck Maylard. How you doing, Duck?
I'm good. I'm excited for a dumb, nerdy reason today, and that is, I don't know if you can see behind me, I have a new desk sitting there waiting for me. I have, you can't see the view this way, but my old desk is cluttered and out of space, and I can't wait to move everything in that. It's like when you get a new car and you park it next to the old car and you take all the stuff out and you put it in and you get to organize. It satisfies such a organizational thing in me. I love it. I'm so excited.
You and I have that in common.
I love building, putting together. I put that together for 2 hours last night till 1 a.m. and it was the best. I love it's like something about, I didn't love puzzles or Legos as a kid, but something about putting together presswood furniture from IKEA or whatever. It's I love it. It's my Zen place. So I'm very excited after this interview is done to start transferring stuff over to my new desk. And I don't know how I'm going to get this thing out the door, but hey, that's a problem for after the show.
Yeah. Well, you lost me there. I don't share your joy of building IKEA furniture.
Yeah.
No, it's more about just organization and having everything in its right place.
Right.
And being able to, when you get rid of old clutter and bring in new things that help you find new order in your life, it's such a satisfying feeling. But I do also have a new piece of furniture in my home in this studio, and I was going to put it on display for this episode, but I couldn't charge it in time. It was your birthday gift.
Yeah, that's right. Ryan had a birthday this weekend. He is years old. So happy birthday.
For those who can't see at home, Duck gave me for my birthday an on-air sign, like from a real recording radio studio. And we'll find a place that makes sense for it in the background of.
I think right next to the Grammys.
Right next. Just hold it right here next to my ear the whole time.
Exactly. Perfect.
Hey guys, we're on air. Remember,
just in case you didn't know. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Doug. I didn't thank you the other day. I
That's
just opened it last night, so thank you.
Yeah, it was. It was something that the minute we started doing this show, I was like, we need an old-fashioned on-air sign or recording or whatever. So.
Oh, you've been holding on to that for over a year?
Well, the desire for it, and I finally, your birthday was the impetus to finally pull the trigger. So I'm glad you like it.
I do like it. It's an age-old thing. It's a gift is so much more meaningful when there's thought put into it, just in terms of the purpose that it serves, not the money that you spend on it, and it's like, when I love it when I get something like that and I'm like, they took the time to think that's something that would be really great in that specific part of their life. I always get a little touched when I have that kind of recognition. I guess my love language is gifts. Yeah.
Well, also that was $700, so I hope.
Oh Jesus!
Yeah, I spent a lot. I went all out.
I think you got ripped off, man.
No. That's an original Italian on-air sign.
On air.
Did you have a good time at your little birthday get-together? We had some people over.
Yeah, it was lovely. It was a nice combo of family and extended family and friends, and I think it was a good mix. We had some kids screaming in the pool. That was a first, and I think that was christened it as a real. That was my first real pool party when you have floaties and kids screaming.
And Barbies at the bottom of the pool, and
yeah. And then we had the octogenarians in their corner,
where my wife was posted up. She was like, "I don't want to hang out with people my age. I want to talk to the old people." She was very excited to just sit.
Well, I will say the old people in my family are pretty interesting, fascinating
they're pretty
old
awesome.
people.
Half of them have been on this show.
That's true. That is true. And as people who have seen those episodes know, they're fascinating and interesting people.
Yeah.
But I love to see all the generations come together like that. That's fun.
Switching gears, I wanted to ask you: did you watch the Emmys the other night? Are you an award show watcher?
I did watch it actually I was in New York at the time, so I watched it from my Aunt Michelle's apartment in
Nice.
Columbus Circle area of Manhattan.
Yeah.
So that was kind of fun
That's cool.
to be in a different venue. Yeah, I've always loved award shows growing up. I would watch the Oscars and the Emmys and the Grammys and everything pretty religiously. And then, I don't know, for some reason in the last, say 10, 15 years, I kind of like, my passion for it kind of waned. I don't know if it was just where I was at in my life. I don't know, maybe not in the last few years, but there was a chunk of time there, 10, 15 years, where it was less so. It was like, oh, it's on, whatever, I'll watch some of it. And I've kind of been feeling of late, like, I want to get back into, you got to have things you look forward to in life, right?
I think if allow me to put on the therapist hat, I feel like you're not alone in that sort of waning interest in that. I think the country and the general interest in award shows, and I think there's a couple of factors in that. One is that thing that you've talked about often, is this sort of, it's not cool to care, and it's not cool to be like excited about things. And I think some of the luster has gone away from Hollywood in the last 10 years. People have realized that there's horrible people here too, and there's a lot of people, and we shouldn't celebrate all that stuff. But by the same token, there's still something really enjoyable about seeing people get dressed up and having a good time and celebrating, especially if it's a medium that you and I both love, in television and film. Like, we like to celebrate that art form, or the Grammys, and I don't think we should apologize for that. But the reason I asked you is because I was struck by that same feeling of like, I like watching this. And as an actor, of course, I fantasize about being there and winning an Emmy or a Grammy or a Tony and an Oscar. I'm gonna EGOT, Ryan. I'm just letting you know now. I'm just putting it out there.
On your way.
Am I? But anyway, the thing that struck me, because I was listening to the playwright Tracy Letts on Mark Maron's podcast, and he is married to Carrie Coon, who is a beautiful, wonderful actress, and she was nominated for an Emmy, did not win. Mark asked Tracy if she cared about that, and Tracy said she couldn't possibly have cared less. And I thought about, if somebody had asked me that question, if I had been nominated for an Emmy and I lost, could I care less? And the cool answer would be to say, I don't care. It's not about awards. But I think the honest answer, and I wonder if Tracy's being honest about his wife, or maybe is that there is a part of you that probably would want to win. It's cool to be recognized. And it's that intersection of pride and confidence with ego and with, you know what I mean? It's like, it's this place where all those things live, and you can't lean into any one too much, because then you're either way too serious or you're way too focused on awards. But it's like, it's okay to want to strive for that recognition. It's okay to want to win an award for your performance, to be recognized. I mean, you've won a Grammy. That's a cool, you've won multiple Grammys. That was probably a really cool feeling, to be like, hey, people recognize and acknowledge the work that we put in, and we achieved something great. And you know what I mean? I did you feel that way? Let me put it in the form of a question.
It was definitely validating and flattering. As an artist, there's always that push and pull between what you're doing and thinking of yourself primarily as an artist, as like, this isn't a competition. This is about creating something that has value, first and foremost to me as the person who's expressing myself, and then to an audience that can connect with it, right? And I think at the same time, it's like, well, does the art have value if it has no audience, right? So like, the recognition that there is an audience that appreciates it is a recognition to a certain extent that you have some value, even if it's not about winning necessarily over somebody else. But it's not like, in sports, you have the win, you won the game, or you won the championship, you have the trophy that shows you all that hard work paid off.
Yeah.
You don't really have those signposts as an artist, other than whether you feel good about what you did, people came to the show, people bought the ticket to the movie,
right?
And then ultimately, to have that moment where you can stand up on a stage and feel the validation of people having voted or cheering for you for something you did. You're not supposed to, as an artist, value that as the way that you value But I think it's impossible. I think the reasons why people say that, like, oh, it doesn't matter to me, is one, because they did have to humble themselves for their art, to be pure with what they're doing, to not get confused about why they're doing it. Because if you're thinking about winning awards, if you're thinking about defeating your competition, you're missing the point in terms of what you're trying to achieve as someone expressing yourself
Right.
through your art form. And because it's also just cool to be like, oh, I don't give a shit, like this,
Exactly.
I don't do it for that reason. I think at their core, like, you wouldn't be at that level if you didn't give a shit. You know what I mean? You wouldn't be at the level where you're winning an Oscar
Right.
if you didn't have some kind of drive that makes you want to rise to the top of your, and like any other profession. And I could tell you, I've been around all kinds of different artists and performers, and it's just like the general population in terms of differing points of view and personalities. But there's huge egos, we know that, people that and then there's also very competitive people, just like in sports or in any other industry, that want to be the best at what they do, and they want to win the race. And then there are those people who genuinely just are like, they want to make great art, and that all that comes secondary. I would say that I actually was, when I started playing music, even when I started the band, even when we signed a record deal, my intent was pretty pure. Like, I liked the fantasy of a lot of the things that came along with success. However, primarily my number one goal is I wanted to make good records.
Yeah.
I wanted to make good records, and I wanted it to be an experience that felt fulfilling as an artist.
Yeah.
I can say that honestly. However, at the same time, like, when you get up there and you get a Grammy, it's a big moment of recognition. Not because we beat Kanye West to get best new artist.
There's some positivity in there.
Yeah, but because it's how many moments do you get in life where, like, all the hard work you've done for a decade comes to fruition, and you get to acknowledge it in that way. So I don't begrudge anyone who in that moment really, I actually love it. I love watching this. That's part of the reason why I love the show. You love seeing someone who loses like, they really get choked up and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. I fantasized about this when I was 8 years old and I first took an acting class. Or like, I don't think that's egotistical. I don't think that's missing the point. I think that's a human being being overwhelmed and overcome by the fact that they have dedicated their life to this. And here's a moment to really take recognition of what they've achieved.
Because
and
it isn't,
how,
it isn't that, like you say, it isn't the winning. It isn't the suck it, Daniel Day-Lewis, I beat you. It's ideally it would be it's you in a category of one, and you are acknowledged for what you did. But I don't begrudge anybody that excitement or that desire to feel that recognition. It feels good. It's there's a reason we as actors stand on stage and get applause at the end. It's nice. It feels good to be like, you watched me for the last 2.5 hours. You appreciate what I did, and you want to let me know that you appreciate it. Well, that's just an extension of that, just to the nth degree, and I happen to be wearing a tux. So
right. Well, there are those moments. I mean, we all, I don't know, it's a subtlety, but you know it when it's happening. When somebody's up there and they're like, oh, this guy.
Yeah.
Like, he's so full of himself, and he's using this moment just to make it all about him, and there's a smugness to it, or they've written a speech and it's like, oh, this guy misses the point. Yeah. And that's, it's hard to avoid, I think. But, that's why I love the moments when it seems like it's just off the cuff and genuine. Like, they're just overcome by emotion of this moment. And there's a fine line between those things. But I think even that is entertaining. when you see somebody, like, the thing that leaps to mind was, I think it was at the Oscars. Well, no, that's a genuine moment. I'm talking about, like, Adrian Brody, when he talked for like 5 minutes. And it was like, what is the point of this? This just seems like he just is enjoying being up there and trying to I don't want to make a statement about Adrian Brody. I just, we all were in that moment. We're like, what? Where is this going? Why is he still up there? Why is he still talking?
I thought you meant the time when he won his first Oscar and he, maybe made an unwarranted sexual advance to Halle Berry, which, 20 years later, revisionist history, we can look back and say, maybe that wasn't the best choice, but it was spontaneous in the moment.
Yeah, that felt spontaneous in the moment. It didn't age well.
No.
And I feel like maybe he was trying too hard 20 years later when he finally got up there again to, like, do the more mature, responsible thing.
That's
like,
a good thought.
Maybe he had planned it that way. He's like, this time I'm going to look like the statesman. But it didn't come off well. It just felt kind of gratuitous.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a fine line, but I don't know, that's part of the excitement. It was like, it's live TV.
Agreed.
It's human beings that are on an incredible level of achievement. Anything can happen. It could either be a really touching moment, a human moment, or it could be kind of like a weird moment. But
Yeah.
either way, it's entertaining.
And there's also to go back to all the way back to the beginning of the conversation where you said the reason why you love that event, and and you wish you could get back to that, is because it's a touchstone to 80 years ago in the Oscars and in the golden age
Tradition.
of Hollywood.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's cool to see, like, I think some of that luster has worn off on, because we have Instagram and we see people's everyday lives, but like, we didn't know what Cary Grant was doing, and you know what I mean, like, so seeing them out on Oscar night was this very cool kind of, oh, there's a peek behind the curtain, and so I think any award show is sort of a chance to get back to that feeling of, oh, they're all in one place. It's it's this cool view of this industry that we love, whether it's television or music or film. So don't be ashamed for loving it. I love it too.
When you said that you were going to play therapist for a minute, and I was talking about my interest in it waning for a certain period of my life, I thought that what you were going to say was, well, does that have anything to do with the fact that was a weird moment in your life that was the intersection of huge success and then also a lot of suffering, and then distancing myself from that to a certain extent? It's like you got wrapped up in that whole world. It was at the end of my time in the band that I was going to awards shows, and it was all about, did we win the Moon Man or the Grammy or the whatever? And once I left that, did I have to sort of go like, I don't give a shit about that stuff. I don't need that stuff.
That's why you're the professional therapist and I'm the amateur therapist, because I didn't go there. I just went to, you like people in tuxedos.
But I think there's probably some, and that made me think about it, because I did kind of distance myself from that world a little bit. Like, I don't care. And now, I don't know, even the last year, I would say, but I've been pondering it for a couple of years. Like, I want to have that childlike wonder of like, look, it's all the famous people and they're getting together for one glorious night. I was never somebody, I was not that impressed with fame and glamour and all that stuff, because we had a little bit of that in my family with my aunt, and so it wasn't the kind of thing that when we started meeting our heroes and stuff, except with the exception of the few that were like, that person literally affected my life in a huge way because I was inspired by their music and I'm actually shaking their hand right now. That those moments, obviously I would get starstruck, but just meeting a famous person or seeing famous people, like that wasn't something that really, I wasn't starstruck in that way.
You also grew up in LA, so it's sort of
that's true.
You see him on the street or whatever.
However, I will say, there were a few occasions when we were in a room with like the A-list of the A-list. I talk about in my book, Harder to Breathe, going to Prince's house for the post-Grammy party and all those people there. But also the one that stands out in my mind was, I think it was after Hurricane Katrina. We were doing some kind of fundraiser live TV event. And it was a telethon where you had all the celebrities up on the stage taking phone calls, and we walk into the studios and it's going on live, and you look up on the stage and it's literally like Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise, Nicolas Cage, Julia Roberts, like people that are just iconic, huge celebrities. And it felt surreal. I did feel starstruck because you see those faces in real life and it's like a wax museum come to life.
You see one of those in real life and it would have been overwhelming to see 7 of them.
Yeah, and they're just human beings, and that's the other thing. Like, obviously, they were gracious enough to give their time, and recognizing that it would make an impact in terms of raising funds for people that were in need in that moment. It's both, you're awestruck and starstruck, but it's also humanizing. You're realizing these are just human beings, and so that's part of it. What's great for me is that intersection of seeing, like, you don't see all these people in one place that often, but they're also just human beings, like having a human moment. I like that.
Yeah. So bottom line, award show's good. Let's get back to it, America. And now let's get back to our interview, shall we?
We shall. So yeah, without any further ado, here's our wonderful conversation with licensed counselor and host of the Put the Shovel Down YouTube channel, Amber Hollingsworth, right here on the Harder to Breathe podcast. There you are. Hi, Amber.
Hello. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
No problem. How are you doing?
I'm well. How are you guys?
Very
Nice to
well,
meet you,
thank you.
Amber.
Nice to
Duck.
meet you, Doc. Nice to meet you
Yeah,
too,
it's
Ryan.
a pleasure. Thank you. Yeah. Look, you got a big sign. You look very official.
Yeah. Yeah, my son thinks you have to have a neon sign if you're a real YouTuber, so anything to impress the son.
It's pretty impressive, this community that you've been able to create on YouTube. You've got like over 700,000 followers. I don't even know how to wrap my head around that. How did you manage that?
Oh my goodness. It's literally the hardest thing I've ever done. It's so hard.
Really?
The YouTube is. I just think, so many things. Yeah.
Because the constant need for engagement and creating content and stuff and staying on top of it.
Yes, and because there's so many skills to master for YouTube, it was just like, oh my goodness. But it's been worth it. It's just been a long haul.
So what do you think it is about your platform and your message that has really resonated, that's allowed you to attract this big of an audience? Obviously, you're making a big impact. You have people that are really getting a lot from the things that you're posting, the things that you're talking about. You're talking about it in a way that is different from the other social media that's out there about on this subject.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you wouldn't have that much attraction. So what do you think it is that you're talking about, that you're doing, that kind of sets you apart?
I think the big thing is that I'm specifically addressing people who have loved ones who have addiction, and I'm telling them what to do, what to say, how to get through to loved ones who are like maybe in denial, who don't either feel like they have a problem, or maybe who they know they have the problem but they like don't think they need help. And a lot of what they usually get is that there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to back up and wait and pretty much like cross your fingers and hope they figure it out. And so if they're sort of desperate for some help on what do I do, is there anything I can do, how do I get this to turn around before, they hit bottom and we lose everything?
How did you narrow down, kind of boil it down to the most essential steps that you have found to be effective that maybe other people haven't? What is it that you were like, let's cut out all the bullshit that, doesn't work or doesn't apply, like just trial and error? Or did you find some eureka moment that was like, aha, this is something that works?
Well, after like working with people who have addictions for 20 years, it's been my whole job basically to figure out how to get through to people who don't want to be sitting in my office, who don't want to be talking to me, who don't think they have a problem, who are usually only in there because someone made them come. And so I've got a lot of years of experience on how do you work with someone like that? Is there anything you can do? And so mostly it's come from trial and error. And then a lot of what I've just learned directly from the clients. All these years, if the only thing they'll usually talk to you about is what they feel like their loved one is doing wrong. My wife, my mom, it's like they're doing this and they're doing that. And so I sort of started with, I know everything they're doing wrong. So let's start with stop doing that, because really hard to get someone to talk about any kind of addiction issue as long as they have a family member who's playing the villain, which isn't fair to the family member, but they get sort of put in that role and they get trapped in the role. And so I help them get out of that.
So are you saying that the person who's addicted becomes the villain, or somebody else in the family that they are identifying as the villain?
Not the addicted person, their family member. That's the way they see it. It's I only drink too much because my wife, she's just always nagging, like I'm only doing this because my parent, this or that or whatever. And so the addicted person has a need to have someone in the villain role, because addiction sort of thrives off self-pity and resentment. And so it's usually the person closest to them, to be honest, which is usually the spouse or parent or whoever it is that is closest to them, usually that lives with them.
It's probably also a person who's enabling them on some level, right?
Right. I personally feel like the most enabling thing people do is they play the villain role way more than like money. I always say, $20, you can give somebody $20 and they may go out and buy whatever they're going to buy, and then it's gone. But if you have one episode where you act like a crazy, screaming lunatic, like crazy person, they will literally use that as the emotional currency to continue doing what they're doing for the next 10 years. So, $20 is whatever, but when you lose your mind, they will, and this because when you're talking to them in therapy, it's all they can talk about over and
Right.
over and over again.
Right, because people get wrapped up in a dance, right? And everyone has their part in that dance. And as long as you are triggering me, then I have justification to keep drinking. And if I keep drinking, then I'm triggering you, and you have justification to keep losing your mind. And around you go in that dance, right?
Absolutely. You nailed it. That's it.
So what do you do to break that cycle? When you have one of those people sitting in front of you who's saying it's their fault, it's their problem, they're the villain. Obviously, we're all guilty of being defensive at times and having ways in which we deflect blame or don't want to take responsibility, because it's hard to point that camera back at ourselves and say, well, I'm the one who has to take accountability here and change something. How do you break someone out of that pattern? And is it something you can do individually, or do you have to really think of it from the family system perspective?
I think it works best if you can deal with it from a family systems perspective. You don't always have the luxury of being able to work with everybody. But what happens is the person who's struggling with addiction, what they're saying to you is somewhat valid, that their loved one is constantly trying to control them, their loved one is critical of them, nothing they ever do is good enough for their loved one, they're constantly being spied on. And I'm sure all that is happening. Like, there's no doubt in my mind. What they don't realize is that behavior is symptomatic of having someone that lives in your house that has an addiction. So you can predictably know that if you live with someone, these are the behaviors they're going to do, and these are the behaviors you're going to do. So what they're frustrated about is definitely happening, but they don't realize that it's a response to something that's going on. So we try to take a look at that, and we work with the family member. You can usually get further with the family member faster because their brain is working slightly more in check. And so we work with the family member to get out of that role. And it's amazing, once the family member does that, the person starts looking at their own stuff pretty quickly because they don't have anything to distract them.
Can we take a step back and you just sort of summarize what it is that you offer, and just for our audience, so, the reason we're here talking to you today, that sort of sets you apart, or that is different from a traditional, a 28-day rehab, or something that's what people see as the only option they have. Well, we got to get this person into rehab. I guess that's what everybody does, but that didn't. The relapse rate is so high in some of those cases. So what is it that you do that's different, just to kind of summarize it?
Well, our goal is to try to help people before they hit bottom, before they need or have to go to rehab. Because not that we're against going to inpatient rehab, but eventually you got to learn to be clean and sober in the real world. And so if you can do it in the real world while you're living at home and working your job or going to school or whatever it is you're doing, we think it's better, because eventually it comes to that anyways. It's one thing to be sober when you're locked up and you don't have access to it, and all you have to do is go to your yoga and your group therapy or whatever. It's another thing to be sober when you're dealing with all the stresses of daily life. And so first and foremost, our goal is to help people do that. And the way that we help people do that is to address the whole family system. So we give everybody their own. We work with family systems, but not in the same room. That's really hard work. So we split them up. And I usually see the person that has the addiction, and then I have other counselors or coaches who see the family members. We call it lawyering. So everybody gets a lawyer and advocate. So it's my job to have my person's back. It's their job to have their person's back. And a lot of it gets solved behind the scenes, like in court. A lot of it gets mediated out. And so we work on it in a parallel process, but we like to have it in two separate rooms so each side feels like they can say what they want to say, still have confidentiality and privacy. We just feel like we can make progress so much faster that way. So when everybody's in the same room, you spend a large part of your energy mediating, making sure no one's feelings are getting hurt and everyone gets to speak the same amount and all this stuff. And it's just exhausting for them and for us. So we divide and conquer.
So do the advocates get together then and go, okay, well, my client says this, my client says this, and you go, okay, I concede this, and then you go back to and say, so here's what your mom said. Is that how it works?
Pretty close. The treatment team behind the scenes, we all communicate with each other, and I'll say, well, can you get this person's wife to stop doing this? And then they'll say, well, we'll stop doing that if y'all can stop doing this, But it doesn't necessarily cross over to the other person unless you want it to. So like if my client tells me something, it won't necessarily get told to their family member unless they want it to cross over. So they still have that privacy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But the two behind the scenes treatment team, we know what's going on.
Is there a concern that there's that somehow enables a lack of accountability in those people because they're not being forced to have those difficult conversations face to face that says, when you do this, it makes me feel like I want to drink, even if that's not a realistic or a mature approach. Is that something that needs to be said so we can debunk it in face to face? You know what I mean? Is there any concern that you're letting people off the hook by not having to have those difficult conversations face to face?
I have found that those conversations are not very effective. What ends up happening is, especially if it's the addicted person, they feel like they're in trouble. So coming to counseling or coaching feels like going to the principal's office. And then they just get defensive and clam up, and then eventually just stop coming because they're just not in a place to deal with that just yet. And so as much as I would like for that to be the case, it just, in my experience, is not the case where those conversations go well.
Well, that's sort of the idea of the family systems model, is that we all tend to point the finger at one person as what we call the identified patient.
Yeah.
And in addicted families, everyone's usually pointed the finger at the addicted person. And then, as you said, the addicted person is probably pointing the finger at someone else that they see as the identified patient who's the problem. But now everyone's just pointing fingers at each other, and everyone just gets more defensive. As we can see in our society in general, the more we sort of point fingers at each other, the more polarized you get.
Right.
And that's true within any system. You just have that polarization that happens. And so when you think of it, when you conceptualize the problem as a family problem, as something that's a symptom of the system as a whole, then everyone has their part in it, and it's not one person who's being identified as the problem, and you're able to work with it. The question I have, though, because you talked about treating this before it hits rock bottom, and that's sort of an age-old question amongst people in recovery. Do you have to hit rock bottom in order to change, in order to really be humbled enough? A lot of times people don't find themselves in rehab until they've hit rock bottom because their defenses are still up. They're still not willing to accept help or admit that they have a problem until they've been so humbled by their addiction that they end up in rehab. So how do you attract these people who are having issues but haven't reached rock bottom, the families, how do you attract families to be proactive about this? Because there's stigma attached to this still. A lot of times people don't want to admit my family's having a problem. They just want to point the finger and say, this person has a problem. It's their problem. Like, why can't they get their together?
Right.
As opposed to, this is a family problem we need to proactively treat. We need to seek help for. If people are in your office, it seems like they're already doing something right. How do you reach the people that don't have that kind of openness or acceptance or willingness to be proactive?
Most of the time, people find us, the family member is the one that finds us first, and they usually find us online on YouTube. And so they spend time either watching the YouTube videos or talking with us or taking our online course or something. And we train them on how to get through to the other person. And then they are able to do that. And then eventually that person sometimes comes to us. I only see a few clients these days. But even if they don't come to us, they go somewhere, right? So they don't necessarily have to come to us, but normally it's the family member that finds us. And the family member is much more aware of the problem long before the person, right? So they're desperate. They're looking for help. They're begging. They're talking to the doctors. They're talking to their friends. They're doing all the things just desperately looking for help, and everyone's telling them that there's nothing they can do. But I found that that's not the case. I've been working with people who didn't think they have a problem since the very beginning, and there's lots of things you can do to help someone see what the issue is. I call it, you can't make someone, obviously, but you can influence them.
It's more that you're offering training or help to the family unit, the support group around them, on how to either deal with those issues or how to get this person to acknowledge that maybe it's time to get some help. Yes. You're giving them a skill set to sort of kick that into gear.
Yes.
I've certainly been guilty of saying you can't, this is true that you can't obviously change somebody else. You can't make someone ready that's not ready themselves. However, I think there's gray area there that you're touching on in terms of what influence you can have or how you can be a part of the solution. So what can family members do? Because sometimes we butt our heads up against a wall, and as you described, you're just making them more defensive when you're saying you need help, you're the problem. What is a more productive approach? What do you tell family members that they can do that can actually influence somebody that's addicted in the direction of them finding acceptance of help?
Normally, what the families do, and this is a natural instinct. I mean, it's just what we naturally do. But normally what happens when you have an addicted like spouse or kid or somebody is you're trying to help them not to burn every bridge and like totally ruin their life. So when they create all these outside problems, you're trying to help them fix them. Like you're trying to make sure they don't lose their job or that they don't miss too many of their kids' functions and then their kids won't talk to them, or they don't get the DUI or they don't fail out of college or whatever it is. And so you're running around fixing everything, all the problems they're causing. But inside the context of the relationship, you're mad at them and you're constantly on them and giving them the side eye and angry with them. And that's what creates the block from this person being able to see it, because they're like, what are you talking about? I make good money. I go to work. I'm still passing classes. And you know, a lot of that's because the family members holding a lot of those responsibilities together, all they see as the problem is the family member. So the first thing, if they do nothing else other than reverse that, that person will speed up their process of figuring this out like immensely. So what I train them to do is, I don't want you to fix any of these outside problems. I want you to let them go. But I want you to be the nice guy whenever possible inside the relationship. So when this happens, I want you to have empathy, because the brain works when you express empathy to someone, it activates the learning part of their brain, as opposed to someone goes out there and messes up, even if they know they've messed up, even if they feel bad, but you're on them about it with some version of I told you so, or I knew this was going to happen, or something like that, then they're immediately going to think and usually say defensive things, which is just convincing them further and further and further that you're the problem. So just, if you do nothing but step out of that, you have like made the chances so much better. Beyond that, we teach people to find the thing that is motivating the loved one, because in almost everyone I've come across, teenage, adult, everyone, there's a part of them that doesn't like something about what's going on. And you got to find what that is. It's their motivation. And then it's like a little seed, and you can water that seed. But you have to use their motivation, their words, their reasoning, and pull it forward. And that's how I've done it for all these years in my practice, is I find what that thing is that the person cares about, pull it forward. Like, for example, I work with a lot of, like, these days I work with a lot of like super high achieving people. I was working this super fancy pants doctor, like even more fancy pants than most doctors. This guy did not want to be talking to me, but he would spend his time telling me what a great doctor he was, which was fine. So I just let him do that, and I listened to all that. And he would tell me how he was so great to these residents that he was in charge of. And so I just listened to him, and I'm trying to like understand who he is. And it's really important to him to be successful and to be seen as successful and to be seen as kind and considerate. The thing is when he drinks, he's not very kind and considerate to his wife. And so once I learned that that's the value that he has that's really important to him, I said, man, you put a lot of time into being a kind, considerate person that people feel safe around, that can come to. And so I'm just planting the seed, right? And then he starts to connect that dot. But when you drink, sometimes that's not the version of you that comes out. And then we pull it forward from there. You have to listen, you have to understand this person and see who they really are, what they value, what they see as important, and then leverage that as the motivator versus all of the, you know, you're screwing this up, you're going to lose your job, you're messing up your kids. None of that. That doesn't do anything but make someone defensive. Even when they know they're in the wrong, it just makes them.
But no, wait a minute. Because I have a little practical experience with this type of dynamic, and I want to kind of not push back, but just sort of, in my experience, my father was an alcoholic who, like you say, blamed everybody else, his problems on everybody else. And my mom, while doing her best to keep the family afloat, definitely played that villain role and pushed back. But I remember my dad coming home from work, already drunk, and then drinking more at dinner and saying, it's Billy at work. That guy's the idiot. That guy. Now, if my mom said, yeah, Ray, you're right. Billy's the problem, or whatever, just not enabling, but just sort of going along with it. My dad would be like, finally, somebody gets it. Pour me another. Like I don't see that as the gateway to him being like, oh, wow, she agrees with me. Maybe the drink is the problem. You know what I mean? Like, how does that translate in that way?
You make a great point. When you're having empathy for them, there's sort of phases of it. At first, you're just helping this person understand that you understand them. You're just, because I call it building credibility. It's like building your credit score. Like if you wanted to buy a house, you have to have credit score of a certain amount. To actually teach people how to like calculate their credit score they have with this person. And for someone to listen to what you have to say about something, they have to not just know that you love them. I mean, we know our people love us, and sometimes that's a burden, to be honest. What people want to, like your grandma loves you, but you might not follow her advice because she's like, she doesn't know what I'm dealing with. People have to feel like you understand them every which way. And when they feel like you understand them, they'll take their walls down. They'll be more honest with you. And when you have an opening, when you get that right moment and you have an opinion on something, they're going to listen to what you have to say because they're like, no, she gets me. She understands my situation. She understands what's going on. So in the situation you gave, Duck, which is a perfect scenario, like I could just see that playing out in a million households, is you could empathize with what it's like to have a boss that's a jerk. Or you could say something about their value of being a good provider. So you don't even have to say you're right. You can say, I appreciate how much you work for us and you go to this job that you don't like to make money for this family. They feel really seen when you say that. And so what you're doing is you're building that credibility. And you don't always have to connect the dots. But if you weren't drinking, so you can sort of set some dots in place and let them connect the dots instead of you trying to say it's the drinking, it's it's the smoking.
So we're not solving the issue in that dinner that night.
Right.
It's for 6 months down the road when there's some of that goodwill built up and that trust
That's
built
exactly
up.
right.
Essentially, you're breaking the cycle of blaming,
judgment
and enabling, and the dance that we talked about, the round and round that you go. When you break that cycle, it's not going to fix the problem in one conversation. You're not going to do something different and then they're going to stop drinking.
Epiphany.
Yeah, it's more that you're creating a new habit, a new pattern, a new way of engaging in which now you're not triggering them anymore. You're actually joining them in their emotional experience, leading to the idea that you're both going to be part of the solution, as opposed to being part of the problem. So that's just step one. And I hear a lot of what you're describing is consistent with things that I experienced in my own recovery process and things that I've studied as a therapist, because one of the concepts that was really hard for me to understand as an addicted person, but I know it's also equally difficult for people who are families of addicted people, it's the idea of giving up control to gain control, right? And the serenity prayer was huge for me. I couldn't even understand what it meant the first 20 times I heard it or saw it and written down, because the idea of, because I'm a control freak and most addicts have this sort of psychology of there's some way I can control the negative feelings I'm having. That's why you turn to this substance to try to control feelings. Yeah. So the idea that I could put down that rock, that I could stop controlling things, and somehow that's going to give me more control, I couldn't even wrap my head around that. But it's true for families too, because part of the reason why you get wrapped up in that cycle of judgment and blaming and enabling is because you're trying to control the situation. You're trying to control the person and to do for them things that they need to do for themselves. And it actually makes the problem worse.
Right.
You're actually part of that dance now where you are, triggering and contributing to the problem. And so by stopping doing that, by just being, a human being who's there for that person, at a certain point, they don't have the same reasons to actively do the things that they're doing that are in that dance with you. And they have to start considering for themselves, okay, well, what's my part of this now? Because you've disengaged with the problem and you've engaged with the solution. And so they have the task then of doing that. And that's a really difficult thing to do because we all want to fix. We want to fix ourselves. We want to fix our loved ones. We see a problem. We want to fix it. And sometimes that's part of the problem. And that's a hard thing to recognize.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think also what you're describing is like the phases, the stages of motivational interviewing is a form of, instead of trying to change someone's mind, joining them where they're at, which they may be pre-contemplation. They're not even contemplating getting sober yet. But as you described, figuring out like what do they want? What is it that they're not getting out of life that's making them turn to addiction? What value system are they not living consistently with? What goals are they not achieving? And just joining them with that compassionate ear in helping them find ways to get to what they actually want, because they don't want to be where they're at. They're just struggling and trying to self-medicate because they're unhappy.
That's it. That's it exactly. I like to say it's like learning not to hit the brakes when you're sliding on ice. You know, apparently they know how to do that in the North, that you just gently tap. That's what it's like. You just gently tap, and that's going to be your better way to come out of this spin cycle that you're in. But it works. I've seen it work over and over and over again. And the reason I think this is so important is because family members, you know, they're doing what they're doing what naturally you would do. There's someone you love who's literally like running in front of the bus. So you're trying to stop them, and that's a natural reaction. It's not like it's your fault that they're doing that. But when you get pulled into that cycle, you're slowing down their process of figuring it out, I guess is what I'm, you know. I don't want to say that it's their fault, because it's not. That was happening regardless, but still, you slow down. So when you can get out of that dynamic, they figure it out faster. And when they get help from there, the help takes. So what you're doing is you're setting the stage. Family members, they want to like speed it up. Like, here's what the problem is, and here's what you need to do about it. You need to go to these meetings. You need to talk to this counselor. You need to go to 90 days of treatment or whatever all the things is. And if you can even get people to agree to do that. But if they have not in their mind come to the conclusion that they have this problem, it's not going to stick. It's not. And in fact, when you're making someone go to counseling who's in complete denial, that could backfire on you easily, because what ends up happening, and to be honest, this is terrible, but usually the family member is the one even paying for the counseling a lot of the times. And I'm like, all you're doing is paying for your person to go talk badly about you to a counselor and have this great ear, and they're really convincing, and they're going to fall for it. I know that because I fall for it. If the family members are not in the background saying, oh, did they tell you this? And I'm like, no, they didn't tell me that. You know, because they're convinced of it. And the counselor can be sucked into this drama and inadvertently making it worse, because, you know, they're coming to tell the counselor all those nasty things you said when you got in a fight, and that you're searching their stuff, and you're like tracking where they go on the tracker. But they're not telling the counselor all the things that led up to that. And so the counselor's like saying, well, you need to have boundaries. And so it backfires on you when you send people before they're, to some degree, they have some level of insight into it.
Ryan, you say, I mean, that's the understatement of the year to say like that's difficult to let go of that control. I mean, I think about it as a parent, you know, we've all seen the movies and stories of kids who, you know, have addiction issues, and, you know, your two roads are either I'm just going to keep trying to send them to rehab and do my thing, or it's this cold, hard, like, sorry, I got to cut you off. And sort of this middle path of, like you say, I can see them jumping in front of the bus, and I'm either going to grab them or I'm just going to, you know, turn away. And this middle path of like, I'm going to let them, but I'm going to support them as they jump in front of the bus. It's so anti kind of instinctive for me as a parent to want to, I don't know what path I would take if my son had an issue where I was like, I either am going to just keep throwing money at it and trying to get him into rehab, or I gotta do tough love and say, you got to figure it out yourself, son. You know what I mean? And this third path seems so anti, like, my instinct to either take care or say I have to protect myself because this is too painful.
Right.
You know? But
it's not either one of those. It's not the forcing into treatment necessarily, and it's not the doing nothing thing either, or kicking them out. It's a, you know, have a conversation with them about what it feels like to be walking towards the bus, you know, and how would he know if he was getting too close to the bus that he didn't want to be? You know, like, you can actually pull people's thinking in a certain way. It does take a lot of, it's not difficult as in it's not complicated, but it takes a lot of self-control. It feels like a Jedi mind trick or something. But that's what counselors do. And the families, you know, they have access to you 24/7. We have access to you once a week for 50 minutes. So the amount that the family can do is massive. And when they play their cards right and they send their loved one into seeing something like me, it's like volleyball. They've set me up and I spike it over, and they set me up. And back and forth, and I set them up and they spike it over. And then we get the ball rolling, whether it's like a teenage kid or somebody's doctor spouse. It's the same thing.
Well, Duck, you've touched on a really important topic, I think, that is important for people that are listening to hear more about. I think families, more often than not, families are trying to be a part of the solution, even when they are part of the problem. So if you're talking to families out there that are addicted families, that have an addicted person in the family, where is the line between support and enabling? How do you know when what you're doing is actually enabling the problem, and how do you recognize that, and what do you do about it?
I have like a formula that I teach people. When you're helping someone, naturally you feel good about helping someone. Think about the times you've helped someone. You leave that interaction feeling great about yourself. When you enable someone, you leave feeling resentful about it because you felt like you did something or gave them something that you didn't want to do. So if you're not sure which it is, ask yourself, did I feel good about that, or did I feel mad about that I had to do that, or that I had to give them money, or that I'm always having to watch their kids, or that they're not, whatever. They can't drive themselves and now I got to drive them everywhere, all the things. So that's how you know the difference is basically it's about how you feel resentment. Enabling will make you feel resentful and helping will make you feel good.
A lot of times, though, that feedback isn't immediate. Like you think you're helping, and then 3 months down the line, you realize, oh, when I gave them that money, or when I drove them that place, that was just to buy drugs. And like you realize after the fact. So it's not always immediate for that feedback. You know what I mean?
Patterns emerge, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It's not always, but usually before you even do it, you have a feel about it. Like you're doing it and you don't really want to normally when you're enabling, and you're ticked off about having to do it. That's a good clue. But I also help people look at enabling differently. Like people are so concerned about, don't enable, you got to make this person, hit bottom. It is very true that people have to get uncomfortable. Like the scale has to tip, right, to get a person to even consider to do something about this problem. But when it tips too far and people have too many consequences, it's very difficult to bring them back from. People lose everything and still keep using. That's the nature of addiction. They're homeless. They lose their freedom. They lose their children. They lose their dignity, their careers, everything. And they still keep using. So there's this sort of pivotal point between uncomfortableness and consequences that's really important, because when it goes too far, I'm not saying you can't bring somebody back from that, but the chances go way down, and it's very difficult because what happens is they just get used to it. When someone's homeless long enough, that's not even scary anymore. They've just done it, and now it's like fine. Plus, what families don't understand is that they're under an anesthesia while this is happening, so they don't feel it like you think they feel it. It's like when you go to the dentist and they're drilling on your face, but you're under anesthesia and you're like, okay, whatever. They don't feel it because they have an anesthesia. So this idea about I have to be really hard on them so they figure it out, that's not exactly it. There's a little bit of that in there, but that's not the whole formula like people think it is.
That's true. I hadn't thought of it in that way. When you're drunk or high, you have sort of a protective shield around you. Like there's nothing getting in really,
Right.
And that's part of the problem. And it's medication, of a certain kind where you're not really, that's why I think a lot of people would argue that you do have to hit rock bottom, is because you're not feeling the pain of the things that are degrading in your life, in your relationships, in your functioning, in your level of distress, until it gets to such a level where it's so obvious to yourself and everyone that you can't deny it anymore. But it does become obvious to the people around you a lot sooner than it becomes obvious to you. We live in denial when we're in the middle of the addiction. You're in that little encased bubble until things get really bad. And so that's why the family also is so important to this, because they're the ones who are actually recognizing that there's a problem. And that's the age-old question, is like, how do you get through to that person who's in that bubble?
Right.
Amber, let me just ask you, because it's, we touched on in the beginning, the put the shovel down, slogan you have back there. What does that mean in terms of your message?
It means you hit your bottom when you put your shovel down. You don't have to keep digging. You don't have to burn every ridge. You don't have to lose everything. And so it's like you can be done as soon as you see the problem. And it's like what you guys are saying is true. Like it has to get uncomfortable, but actually what really does it is there's always an uncomfortableness inside of someone about who they are and how they're behaving. And that really will pull someone forward and keep someone moving forward so much faster, so much stronger, so much longer. Those external consequences, yes, they're important because they make you have like a wake-up call. But if you don't take action during that wake-up call, it's going to last a few hours, 2 days max. Like, you know, you hit those little bottoms, you get the DUI, whatever, and you think, I'm never going to do that again. You know, how many times does that happen? And then, you know, 2 days later, you're right back at it, right? So, yeah, those moments are helpful to get you to realize it, but it's these other pieces that are inside where this person doesn't like who they're being and this person doesn't like who it's turned them into. That's the real deal. And when you can access that and pull it forward, that's really why people not just get sober, people get sober for every reason, and they're all good reasons. There's no bad reason to do it. I don't care if it's to not go to jail. That's a great reason, if you ask me. Fantastic. No bad reason. But the reason people stay sober is these other more deeper things, because otherwise you just try to figure out how to how to find the loophole for that consequence. And maybe you're still drinking, but you just stop driving, you just take Ubers, whatever. You're solving that part of the problem, but not the other part. Or, you know, you just get a divorce and now your wife's not mad at you anymore. Or she's permanently mad, but you don't live with her or whatever. You know, like you're just trying to sort of circumvent and not have that consequence.
You're treating the symptoms, not the cause.
Yeah. How can I make sure that one thing doesn't happen anymore? And you miss the big picture.
Yeah, because the bigger picture, I think, is that addiction is a shame spiral, right? It's not any one of these behaviors or any one of these consequences that's the problem. It's the every time that something like that happens, you say to yourself, I'm not going to do this again, but then you continue to do it and you feel shameful about it, and that makes you drink more or use more. And then that causes more behavior that is shameful. And then so you get stuck in that loop and spiral of shame that keeps you in your addiction. And you just find more and more ways to rationalize, or things that you said that are just peripheral, to change to try to treat the problem rather than getting to the core of the problem. And that's what a lot of people, I think, don't get and don't understand why, in terms of motivation for change. I think people think that you're just not drinking anymore, not using anymore, and therefore you're healthier. You're going from being in a shame spiral to not experiencing shame anymore and living in a way that feels consistent with your values.
Right.
That's consistent with the person you want to be, which makes you a happier person. So you're not just giving up this thing that was a crutch, you're actually changing your entire relationship with yourself in the process. It's so hard, again, so hard to see that when you're stuck in the middle of the shame spiral, because you're just beating yourself up and you don't think you're capable of living in the way that you would like to live. That's got to be a real challenge when you're dealing with the addict themselves. How do you kind of connect with them on what their values are, what their aspirations are for living? How do you get them to see what life could look like on the other side of this journey if they do find recovery?
In that positive way that, like you say, doesn't make people go, whoa, I'm feeling attacked. Yeah, how do you...
Well, what's interesting is the version of themselves that they show to the counselor is usually the version that they want to be. And honestly, who they truly are on the inside. You know, they're showing you these pieces of who they are and what they care about and what they think about. And so when they're talking to me about their kids or whatever, I'll say, man, you know, being a good father is really important to you, especially since you went through this and this and this in your childhood. And what happens is that plants the seed. That is really important to me. I don't have to say, and because you're drinking, you're actually abusive dirtball or whatever. They'll make that connection on their own. I'll say, wow, this is really important to you. Why is this so important to you? I find that little seed in there and I harvest it out and I pour water on it over and over. And then I find their strengths and their things they're good at. And like, wow, you're really good at this or whatever. And then they start to connect the dots. And then once they're open to thinking about it, they have to go through this phase like Ryan was talking about. I call it bargaining. There's going to be a bargaining phase. It's trial and error, and everyone does it. And it's a good sign because it means the person's trying to figure it out. Is everything they're going to try work? No, it's not going to work. But helping people to go through the bargain, you can't stop it, but you can speak it up. So when they say all the things that they're going to say, like, I'm just going to do it on the weekends. I'm not going to spend more than $500 on it. I'm just going to drink beer, not liquor, all the things, whatever. Then I say, I think that's a great idea. I agree. If you cut it down to that, it really wouldn't be an issue, would it? And then I say, let's put that on your tree or whatever. And I'll say, Some people find that they can do it, but it's really hard. So if we get in this process and it's like you're doing it, but like it's not even worth the energy, then we'll reassess it. Some people find that they can't do it, and some people find that they can do it, but they can't do it consistently. So we're just gonna like try this out, and then we're gonna see how you're doing with it. We're gonna like make adjustments as we go, and so then you're setting it up for them to try the thing and then to be able to be honest with you about what the results are. Because the truth of it is if it's a bargain, they're not going to be able to do it consistently. And I know that, right? But they need to know that. And my job is to help them figure that out faster. I can't tell them that answer, but I can plant that seed by saying, well, you might experience this. If you do, that's cool. That's normal. If you might experience this. So I'm going ahead and planting like multiple choice in solutions, how this is going to turn out. And then they're like, you know what? You're right. Like I did go to that wedding and just drank 2 drinks, but oh my God, I was miserable the whole time. And all I could think about was more, I'm like, God, no, it's not even worth it, is it? You know? And then we bring that person right along with it. So it's about pulling what's in there forward and helping this person come to the conclusion rather than trying to cram it in. And so I do it in my sessions, and I teach family members to do it in their parts where they can have influence. Now, the terrible part about it is what I ask family members to do is I feel guilty about it. I feel like it's like cruel and unusual because they're already struggling. The families are already just taking on all the responsibilities. They're already like, you want me to do what? And I'm like, I know, it's not fair at all. I'm telling you now it's not fair, but I'm also telling you it works. And I'll say, I'm not telling you should do this. You might not should. Like, you might should walk away, and let me give you some reasons why you might should walk away. And I'll give them all the reasons. But if this is what you're going to do because you can't walk away or you don't want to walk away or you whatever, and this is what you want to do, this is how to do it.
That was my instinctive response when you've talked about this process of it would be so difficult for me to be the positive, to have that positivity. Someone who's been hurt so many times, burned by this person's behavior, to find that empathy inside me when I feel like I don't have any left would be such a challenge. But I think you really hit the point on the nail on the head when you said, when you don't have the option of walking away, maybe this is a family member, maybe this is a provider, maybe this is a child that I'm never going to just write them off. Oh. What's your other option? Your other option is to not have this person in your life. And if that isn't an option, then you've got to find a solution, and it might not be easy for you. It might not be comfortable, but if it works, does it matter in the end? I don't know.
And what's cool about it too, Duck, is that when you start changing your behavior, does it fix them immediately? No, but it almost immediately changes the way they start reacting to you. And so their addiction may not go away immediately, but very, very quickly, they'll start interacting with you differently. And so it's easier to have that empathy because they're easier to deal with because they're not being so difficult for you. So they'll change their attitude towards you long before they'll change the addiction. And that makes it easier. So we get a little domino effect going in the right way.
Amber, let me ask you a 2-part question. Mm-hmm. What was it that led you to this as sort of a calling and you wanting to help people in this way? And 2, what was it about traditional treatment or things that maybe you didn't find effective or you didn't agree with that led you to find this specific technique that you have found that's worked?
Great question, and they both connect to each other. So I landed in this field by accident. This is usually the first question I get because everyone else that's in this field is in recovery, and I am not in that kind of recovery. I come from an addicted family. I mean, hardcore, as in all the grandparents, the parents, the sister, everybody. Like, my mom was doing meth with my sister. Like, hardcore, okay? But that's not why I'm in the field. I wish I could say that because it'd be a better origin story. And the bane of my existence is not having the best origin story. Because everyone else in the field, they have this great origin story, and I wish I had a great origin because it just gets immediately, like, get credibility. I have none. So I landed in the field, and after I was in the field, then I came to realize how addicted my family was. But when you live in it, it's just normal. Like, I didn't know what I was in the field, so I can't even say that's why I'm here, okay? But I used to be super insecure about not being in recovery because that's the first question your client wants to know. Are you in recovery? What they're really asking is, can you understand me? But as a new baby counselor, I was insecure about it. And so I would say, I'll tell you when you graduate the program. And then by the time they graduate, they didn't care. I would tell them then it didn't matter. But in the end, I think it serves me really well. I think it's what's helped me to be able to do this because I don't have a story to project onto someone. I don't have a bunch of preconceived notions. When you're in recovery yourself, you can get stuck in projecting your story onto someone else. And I see this happen all the time because for a long time I did supervision of counselors. And so it's like, well, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're doing because I did the same thing. And you can, if you're not careful, not all people in recovery do this, but you can get kind of a, I got my shit together. Why can't you get yours together kind of attitude? And well, I guess you just haven't suffered enough. Come back when you're ready kind of thinking. But for me, because I didn't have any of that, and they don't teach you this in counseling school, by the way. They don't teach, you get one class on addiction, which consists of go to like 3 AA meetings and write a paper on it. Like literally, that's it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just had to learn trial and error. And when I first got in the field, they put me in with teenagers. And I was listening to one of y'all's episodes, and I can't remember which one of you. Was it Ryan? You said you worked with teenagers in the beginning? One of y'all worked with teenagers.
For a
and
bit
I was really
did, yeah.
relating to that. It was like me. I was like, oh, that was me. I had been a high school teacher for a couple years, and I had interned for 6 months in some kind of adult chemical dependency outpatient program. So this place that I got hired at said, oh, great, we want you to develop and run this teenage program for teenage drug addicts. I'm like, okay, sure. You know, I was like just excited to have a job. I didn't want them to know I didn't know what I was doing. Man, I got thrown in sink or swim. It was just me. They wanted me to make the program up, which I did, I just made it up. And then figure out these kids. And so my goal was to make these kids show up because I knew if they didn't show up, because it was an intensive outpatient program, if they didn't show up, then my bosses would know I didn't know what I was. So I had to quickly learn how to build rapport with these teenagers that had drug problems, and getting teenagers that don't even have drug problems to show up and talk to you for 3 hours at a time, 3 times a week, is not easy.
Yeah.
So I have to really, really, really listen to people, and I'm listening for who they are. I know the story of addiction. Like, it's the same story. I could just repeat it to you. You know, you could tell me what's going on with someone. I could say, well, here's what they're going to do tomorrow. But what I listen for is who someone is. And that's the information I use to help people figure it out and get on the other side of it.
Can I play therapist just for a minute here with you and ask you a couple questions?
Yes, sure.
Would that be okay?
Yeah.
So I get why you say your origin story is not really connected in terms of you being an addict, but coming from a family that was addicted and that many family members, in particular in your family unit, your mother and your sister, and having that bond between them both as addicts, what role did you play in that family system?
Family hero. Mm-hmm. That's the one. So I sort of dealt with that just by being really focused on what I was doing. You know, I was sort of raised myself, and my parents would probably even tell you that, you know. I was working from the time I was 13. I was going to school. I got myself in college. Like, I just was so focused, which was helpful because I was like literally kind of oblivious to everything around me, to be honest. So I was just like doing my own thing and staying in between the lines. And so that's how I ended up in the position that I am.
What was that, what did that role serve exactly? Was it for you to get away from the family system, or was it to lift them up in some way? Like what did it serve? How did it serve you to be the family hero, and how did it serve the system?
Probably both of those things. Even though I grew up in an addictive family, I wasn't horribly unhappy. In fact, when I look at my childhood, I think I was probably much happier than most of the people that I see that, you know, had lots of things. I mean, we didn't have money. My mom, you know, was on government housing, stuff like that. But my mom was a kind person. She had a lot of friends. She was very attractive. She treated us really well. My grandmother, who was an alcoholic, oh my gosh, she was like our savior. Like, even though they were addicted, they were still good people. And I think that does help me because I can see that someone has an addiction and that's not all of who they are. And it doesn't automatically mean that they're this horrible, like, loser of a person. So yes. I was loved and cared about and supported always. Now, they didn't always have the money to help me with everything. And I had to figure things out on my own as far as like solving problems in school and stuff like that. But they weren't terrible to me. My mom had lots of boyfriends, and husbands and, but I do my own thing. So,
Well, that was kind of my hunch, that there's probably a bigger connection there than maybe even you're recognizing in terms of the empathy that you have for your clients, the ability that you have to understand the nature of the system and have compassion for even the people that may be really causing problems in their own lives and in the life of their family members. To be able to recognize that system and have compassion for all of the members of it and how it operates, that's not something that you gained in grad school. That's something that you gained from life experience, understanding the nature of this disease. And then also the role that you've played, I'm sure it's weird how sometimes we find partners in life or places in life and purpose in life thinking like, oh, that's a coincidence that we ended up there. But it's like, no, there's probably some way in which we found ourselves in that
like
situation
almost like
because
attracted to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're playing the hero with your clients at this point. You're playing a similar role, coming in and being and I don't say this in a bad way. You're the savior. You're coming in and giving them the tools that they need. And in some ways, it sounds like you were the parentified child, the only one who was really responsible enough to go out in the world and make something of your life. And whether it was consciously an attempt to get out of the sickness of your family, or it was a way to try to pull them out of their situation in one way or another, you were trying to find solutions. That was your role in the system, was to be the responsible one. And now you've recreated that in your current role as this facilitator in this wonderful recovery center and online community.
No, you're definitely spot on. I think it all plays in. It's just not like a conscious decision like most people. Like I was an alcoholic, and then I did this, or I was a drug addict, and I was on the street, and I got arrested, and then I went back to school. Like, it would be my life would be so much easier if I could do that. But honestly, like I said, I feel like because I didn't have that story, I had to build credibility otherwise. I had to be really, really good to get people to, like, show up or even care what I had to say. So in the end, I think it serves me well, not being in recovery, but it's been a challenge.
The people who are the best teachers aren't always the ones who, did the thing that they're teaching. I mean, some of the best, not to make it about my life, but like some of the best acting teachers in the world that I've ever dealt with didn't have huge careers as actors. They weren't movie stars, but they connect with something on a cellular level that they have the ability to pass that message along in a way that other people might not. So again, it's not a prerequisite that you have to have lived the experience to which you are attempting to speak. So
yeah,
I absolve you of that feeling.
Thank you.
How has working with this community, this clientele, affected you? Has it been a growing process for you? Has it given you perspective on the things that were challenging for you, dealing with your family? Like, where are you at now personally working with this demographic?
Personally, for me, the way I've been able to really sort of do this for so long, because the average sort of career span of addiction counselors is 5 years, which is really unfortunate because it takes longer than that to be one. So that says something about the burnout rates. And I feel like for me, the saving grace is because in my mind, it's not my job to make someone never drink or use again. My primary goal when I'm working with someone is to make sure they have a really good experience with me, so that if they do go out and do that again, that they're willing to come back and talk to me or someone else. And they're not going to be scared and worried about that. They're going to be like, oh, I know exactly what to do, and I'm not even nervous about doing that. And once I make that my primary goal, I don't get burned out nearly as fast because I don't see it as a personal or professional failure. In fact, I'm like, oh, we're just still in the bargaining. All right, sweet, bargain number one. And so it helps me to stay emotionally okay, because when you tie your sense of self to whether or not someone has a relapse or something, that will get you burnt out and make you lose all of your empathy, and you just get frustrated with the person, frustrated with yourself, and then you're like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Do you feel that? Do you feel like if you hear that a client that you worked with has a relapse or backslide, do you feel a letdown, or you just see it as, okay, that's the next step in this process and let's get right back at it, or anything like that? Is that something that professionally you can sort of remove yourself emotionally from, the way that I might be really bummed if someone that I was helping had a relapse?
Normally my response is I feel really sorry for them, because it's usually very painful. And they've usually, by the time they're talking to me, they're just like, oh my God. And then I did this, and then I did this. And then I'm like, oh my God, you poor thing. Like, that's how I really feel terrible for them. And then as far as what I do clinically is I just sort of damage control it. If they're in there telling me, I'm like, all right, this is a blip, and we damage control it, and we get ourselves sort of right back on track. But
roll up our sleeves and get back to work.
And we analyze it, we debrief, we figure out what happened or whatever, we learn from it, and we move forward. So am I disappointed? I guess a little bit, but mostly I just hate it for them because these relapses, they hurt. They're painful, and and they're so mad at themselves. They don't need me to be mad at them.
That's a good point. So if listeners and viewers of our show have liked what they've heard today and they think this might be a solution or an avenue that I haven't gone down, how can they find your program, and what are different ways they can get in touch?
The best way to find me is on YouTube, and the channel is called Put the Shovel Down. There are thousands of videos there. If you're trying to figure out how to get yourself in recovery, there's lots of videos for you. If you have a loved one and you're trying to figure out how to help them, there's plenty there for you as well. So
where do you go from here? What is you have this big community on YouTube, and you have a recovery center. You're obviously thriving as a professional and as an advocate. So do you have goals beyond where you're at now? Are you growing to something bigger? Is this kind of you're living your dream right now?
Both. I feel like I am living my dream. I literally have the dream job of any addiction counselor in the field. Like, you just cannot have a better situation. At least that's what I think. I love it. So there's that, but my big goal is to spread recovery faster than addiction is spreading, and being able to leverage platforms like YouTube and being able to come on podcasts like this is helping me to do that. And the reason is because it's not even just to help this person who has an addiction. It's to help everyone around them. When I was first in the field and I was dealing with these teenagers, it would have been so easy for me to just be like, these guys don't want it. They're just teenagers, Because honestly, that's what everyone else in the field says. Like, I could have totally got away with that. But when their parents and their spouses are calling you up crying and desperate, like, you have to help them, like, that's what keeps me in the game, because it doesn't just change their life. It changes the lives of everyone else in their family, sometimes for generations. So it causes a domino effect in the right way. I'm just trying to spread recovery.
Well, I've seen so much people, they find the right message at the right time, and it can make a huge difference. And just the amount of stigma that we carry, even talking about this stuff, I really am a firm believer that the more we have frank conversations about the nature of a disease like addiction, the more we're actually giving people the opportunity to find the help and the resources they need. So I thank you very much for not just being, a professional in the field, but actually, putting your money where your mouth is in terms of publicly creating a platform that does offer that to people in a really effective way, and being a part of this conversation that is the solution towards people finding help. So thank you, Amber, both for that and for coming on our show and talking about it here.
No, thanks for having me. This has been great. It was a great conversation.
All right. Our guest on today's episode has been Amber Hollingsworth. We want to thank her for her time. This is a wonderful conversation. And if you liked what you listened to, tune in every week. Every Tuesday, we have new episodes right here on the Harder to Breathe podcast. We'll see you next time right here on the Harder to Breathe podcast.
Smooth.
See ya.